What the history books left out about Lee's surrender. As twilight settled over Virginia on April 9, 1865, a pivotal chapter in American history was being written in a quiet, unassuming town, an act that would ultimately determine the future of a country fractured by internal strife. General Robert E. Lee, the celebrated leader of the Confederate forces, was now confronting an inescapable truth: the necessity of yielding to Union General Ulysses S. Grant. Yet what if this surrender was far more than a simple admission of defeat? What if it represented the climax of intense personal turmoil, strategic errors, and a profound commitment to maintaining honor in the face of devastating loss? Join us as we delve into the hidden narratives of this critical juncture, tales that expose the powerful collision of pride, principle, and compassion on that decisive day. Make sure you're part of our community by liking and subscribing to Rootvolutionary for more content like this. The path to Appomattox was marked by despair and an inexhaustible chase. After 4 grueling years, the Civil War had left both the Union and the Confederacy deeply wounded by unprecedented carnage. By the spring of 1865, the Confederate cause was disintegrating. The loss of Richmond on April 3rd was a devastating blow. As the capital, its capture heralded the inevitable downfall of the Southern war effort. Lee's army was in a desperate westward flight, attempting to outrun Grant's advancing Union regiments. The condition of Lee's troops was catastrophic. They were exhausted, famished, and their spirit was broken. A severe winter had exhausted their resources and resolve. Once proud soldiers now marched with gaunt expressions and aching hunger. Despite counsel from his commanders like General James Longstreet to discuss terms, Lee held fast to the conviction that continued defiance was both honorable and essential. On April 7th, Grant dispatched a solemn message to Lee asking him to acknowledge the futility of his position. "I feel it is my duty to relieve myself of the responsibility for any further loss of life," Grant stated. This communication revealed not just Grant's tactical acumen, but also his wish to stop the violence that had consumed so many on all sides. Lee, however, remained steadfast, demanding to know Grant's conditions before even considering capitulation. As time elapsed and federal forces tightened their grip, Lee's most trusted advisors appealed to him with increasing desperation. They voiced their fears for his safety and the welfare of their men. General Longstreet cautioned that further struggle was pointless. "We have reached the final stage," he argued, pressing Lee to surrender for the salvation of his soldiers. In spite of this advice, Lee continued with resolve. He was convinced that surrender meant betraying the very ideals he had championed: states' rights and Southern sovereignty. When April 9th arrived, the two armies were set for a final clash. Lee's numbers had been severely reduced. They were mere specters of their past strength. In a final attempt to seize the initiative, Lee launched an assault on Grant's fortified lines at Appomattox Station. This move would end in disaster, as Union cavalry commanded by General Philip Sheridan decisively blocked Lee's escape route and captured crucial provisions. Sheridan's men were unwavering. They acted with speed and purpose, taking thousands of Confederate troops prisoner in engagements that left Lee's army surrounded. In the midst of the battle's confusion, Lee was forced to make a painful decision: fight on against impossible numbers or seek terms for surrender. The gravity of his choice weighed on him heavily as he considered the destiny of his men and the South's impending future. With Grant's army moving swiftly toward Appomattox Court House, victory was nearly in their possession. The Union troops advanced with remarkable energy and cohesion, Grant would later write. They pressed on with fixed purpose, prepared to conclude 4 years of savage warfare. The legendary encounter between Grant and Lee occurred at the residence of Wilmer McLean in Appomattox Court House, a site that would forever be linked with the war's conclusion. Upon entering the room, the difference between the two generals was pronounced. Grant wore a soiled field uniform, while Lee was impeccable in his Confederate gray, complete with an ornate sword. This occasion transcended military procedure. It was laden with feeling and historical significance. Grant started by reminiscing about their prior acquaintance during the Mexican-American War, establishing an air of professional regard despite their opposing positions. These two men had known each other as junior officers. Now they met as adversaries at the close of a horrific national conflict. During their discussion of surrender terms, Grant showed surprising generosity, permitting Confederate officers to retain their personal sidearms and horses. This act demonstrated Grant's insight that national mending would need empathy, not disgrace. He acknowledged that many Confederate soldiers were merely yearning to go home after years of fighting for their convictions. As Lee made ready to depart McLean's home after signing the documents, he stopped on the porch, looking out toward his defeated army. It was a deeply symbolic instant, a commander wrestling with failure and his duty to his men's welfare. Bystanders recorded the solemn mood as Union officers stood in respectful silence while Lee rode off to announce the surrender. The emotional impact of this capitulation reached far beyond a military conclusion. It struck a deep chord within both armies. Soldiers from North and South alike cheered and cried at the news, a recognition of mutual sacrifice and anguish during 4 years of brutal war. Lee's exit from McLean's home was not just a physical departure, but an emotional one as well. He was leaving behind not only his command, but an entire existence that had given his life meaning for so long. As he rode away from Appomattox Court House, a powerful sense of grief was felt by many, not only for their lost cause, but for the leader who had guided them through innumerable battles. Lee's surrender at Appomattox did not just signal the end of fighting. It established a model for forgiveness in a nation ripped apart by conflict. While this moment is frequently hailed as the war's definitive end, we must appreciate its intricacies. The internal battles of figures like Lee, who confronted impossible circumstances and made soul-crushing choices in the name of honor. In hindsight, what history frequently forgets are these human aspects. The emotional distress endured by leaders and common soldiers during this decisive point in the American story. The heritage of Appomattox acts as a lesson that even in loss, there exists a chance for empathy and recovery. In the aftermath of Lee's surrender at Appomattox Court House, powerful emotions swept across the North and South. For numerous Southerners who had battled courageously under Lee, there was anguish mixed with release. Relief that the killing had stopped, but despair for the future, a broken nation now confronted with the monumental task of rebuilding. In Washington, D.C., reports of Grant's triumph at Appomattox spread rapidly. President Abraham Lincoln saw this as a chance for restoration, not revenge. He famously advocated for acting with malice toward none in dealings with their former foes. This view, however, was not universal. Certain groups in Congress pushed for severe punishments for ex-Confederates, while others pleaded for mercy, illustrating the divided opinions on how to best mend the fractured Union. As Reconstruction commenced in the wake of Lee's surrender, difficult questions emerged about integrating millions of newly freed slaves into society while addressing the resentments of Southern whites who felt they had lost their entire world. A detail often absent from historical accounts is how deeply intimate this surrender was for both generals. For Robert E. Lee, it signified not only a military loss, but also a personal failing. A man who had devoted his life to protecting his beliefs now found himself vanquished by superior forces. Lee's pride was a major factor throughout this ordeal. He found it difficult to accept defeat, even as those around him begged him to stop the fighting sooner. His hesitation arose from more than tactics. It was born from a deeply embedded code of honor integral to Southern identity during the conflict. Conversely, Ulysses S. Grant handled the situation with a practicality formed by years of commanding men who had endured immense suffering. He knew intimately what prolonged war would mean for everyone involved. The meeting at McLean's home became emblematic, not only denoting an ending, but also serving as a powerful example of how two opponents could meet under extreme circumstances, despite profound ideological divisions. In subsequent reflections on their encounter, Grant observed their physical contrast, one neatly attired, the other splattered with mud from campaign. Yet, both shared a mutual respect, hardened in the fires of 4 years of relentless warfare. This stark difference underscored not just their individual paths, but also served as a reminder of our shared humanity during war. How even those on opposing sides can discover mutual understanding when confronted with hard decisions that shape countless lives during periods of struggle. As the smoke cleared on that momentous day at Appomattox, the sounds of battle gave way to quiet. But the consequences of Lee's surrender would be felt for decades. It was more than a military conquest. It was a profound instant of introspection for a nation struggling with its own soul. General Lee, a man once idolized as an icon of Southern virtue, now embodied the nuanced nature of honor and sacrifice. But what really happened in those last moments of discussion? What was racing through Lee's consciousness as he looked upon his men, knowing he must tell them of their surrender? And how did Grant, a general who had struggled so fiercely against him, perceive this historic event? The surrender at Appomattox was not just a conclusion. It was the commencement of a difficult and lengthy road toward national unity, a path filled with obstacles, aspirations, and the dream of a single nation once more. As we consider this defining event, we should ponder, how do we uphold the wisdom gained from our history? What does it mean to discover grace in loss, and how can we use these truths in our own time? If you appreciated this deep dive into history, please support our channel by liking this video and subscribing to Rootvolutionary. Your subscription helps us continue to bring you thought-provoking content. Thank you for watching.